Hollywood loves to sell dreams, but behind the red carpets and flashing cameras, some dreams turned into nightmares. What happens when actresses are pushed into roles that are too revealing, too violent, or simply too damaging for anyone to bear? From child stars robbed of their innocence to rising talents trapped by exploitation, these performances left scars that fame could never erase. Tonight, we peel back the glitz and glamour to expose the worst roles ever forced upon actresses, the ones that changed lives, shattered careers, and revealed the brutal truth about the price of stardom. Brooke Shields in Pretty Baby, 1978. Brooke Shields was only 12 years old when she starred in Pretty Baby, a movie that shocked audiences with its controversial storyline. In the film, Brooke played Violet, a young girl growing up in a New Orleans brothel, auctioned off to the highest bidder. It was a role filled with heavy adult themes, and many believe a child should never have been put in such a position. "I didn't really understand it all," Brooke later said. "I just did what I was told." The film was supposed to be a commentary on the exploitation of women, but casting a real child in such a mature role crossed a line. Critics and viewers felt uncomfortable watching Brooke act out scenes that should have involved adults, not a real 12-year-old girl. Even though the director claimed it was artistic, many saw it as irresponsible. Shields' mother, who also managed her career, faced harsh criticism for allowing her daughter to take part in such disturbing scenes. Brooke's performance turned her into a sensation almost overnight, but it came at a price. From that point forward, the media and public often treated her as an adult, not a child. She was constantly asked about her looks and her body in interviews, forced to navigate a world she wasn't ready for. The early sexualization set a tone for much of her young career, complicating her efforts to transition into serious, respected roles later in life. Despite the controversy, Brooke Shields survived Hollywood's rough waters and eventually took back control of her image. But the memory of Pretty Baby remains a harsh reminder of the dangers child actors face when the adults around them prioritize fame over protection. It's a painful chapter that still sparks heated debates about how far Hollywood should go in the name of art. Brooke Shields' experience showed how badly Hollywood could fail to protect young actresses. But what happens when a child actor is pushed even deeper into a dark, adult world, not just playing the role, but living with its heavy emotional scars? Let's move to the next heartbreaking story, Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver. Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver, 1976. Jodie Foster was only 12 when she played Iris, a young prostitute in Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. The movie is now hailed as a classic, but at the time, many couldn't believe a child had been cast in such a disturbing role. "It was hard," Foster later admitted. "There were things I didn't understand." The role put Jodie in the center of one of the darkest stories ever told in American cinema. Because of the role's mature and dangerous themes, Jodie was required by the court to attend therapy sessions during filming. She even had an adult body double for the more graphic scenes. But even with those precautions, nothing could shield her completely. Playing Iris meant stepping into a grim world of violence, manipulation, and survival, topics no 12-year-old should have to tackle. Foster's maturity impressed everyone, but few stopped to think about the long-term emotional cost. Foster delivered a performance so powerful it earned her an Oscar nomination. Yet the fame brought new pressures. Suddenly, she wasn't seen as a kid anymore. She was viewed through a harsher, more adult lens. Reporters, fans, even Hollywood insiders treated her differently. Foster became extremely cautious about her career choices moving forward, determined not to be trapped in the shadow of Iris forever. Looking back, Taxi Driver raised an important question that Hollywood still struggles with today. Just because a young actor can handle adult material doesn't mean they should be asked to. Jodie Foster turned out to be one of the rare child stars who survived and even thrived, but not without scars. Her story remains a warning about the hidden dangers behind even the most celebrated performances. If Jodie Foster's story was about surviving emotional danger, Linda Blair's was about facing terror head-on. What happens when a 13-year-old is asked not just to act scared, but to live inside a nightmare day after day? Let's dive into the chilling experience of Linda Blair in The Exorcist. Linda Blair in The Exorcist, 1973. Linda Blair was just 13 when she took on one of the most shocking roles in movie history, Regan McNeil, a sweet girl possessed by a demon. The Exorcist became a sensation, but few thought about the young actress who had to endure terrifying scenes for months. "It changed my life forever," Blair later said. "I was a kid. I didn't even know what half the words meant." The role demanded Linda perform horrifying acts, violent thrashing, foul-mouthed tirades, and scenes of extreme psychological and physical distress. The grueling shoot included dangerous stunts, like being yanked around on wires and subjected to freezing temperatures. Some injuries she suffered during filming stayed with her for years. Although safety measures existed, the emotional strain of playing a possessed, brutalized child was something no precautions could truly soften. When the film was released, Blair became an overnight star and a lightning rod for controversy. Religious groups targeted her, calling her evil and blaming her for the film's perceived blasphemy. She received death threats, needed security escorts, and found herself trapped by the role's dark legacy. Hollywood wasn't prepared to protect a young actress from the backlash her performance stirred up. Despite earning an Oscar nomination, Blair's career never fully recovered from the typecasting. She struggled for years to be seen as anything other than the girl from The Exorcist. Today, her experience stands as a brutal example of how Hollywood often demands too much from its youngest stars and leaves them to deal with the consequences alone. Linda Blair's terrifying experience shows just how far Hollywood was willing to go for a shocking performance, no matter the cost to the child at the center of it. But sometimes, the harm didn't come from horror films. It came from the very people trusted to protect young actors. Up next, Jackie Cooper and the disturbing truth behind his tearful performance in Skippy. Jackie Cooper in Skippy, 1931. Jackie Cooper was just 9 years old when he earned an Oscar nomination for his role in Skippy. But the way filmmakers got his emotional performance is still shocking today. In one heartbreaking scene, Jackie's character was supposed to cry, but the young actor couldn't summon real tears on command. To force the emotion, director Norman Taurog, who was also Jackie's uncle, threatened to shoot Jackie's dog. "They told me they were going to kill my dog if I didn't cry," Jackie later said. And in a cruel twist, someone even fired a gunshot off stage to make him believe it. The trauma worked. Jackie cried uncontrollably, and Taurog got the heartbreaking scene he wanted. But the emotional damage was real. Jackie was so shaken that he needed a doctor on set to calm him down. Although his performance was praised across the world, few knew the cost behind it. His biography would later be titled, "Please Don't Shoot My Dog," a painful reminder of the exploitation he suffered in Hollywood's early days. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the manipulation. Studios often used emotional threats to control Jackie. They told him he would be replaced by a younger actor if he didn't perform perfectly, and they made him feel guilty for supposedly letting down his fans. Working grueling 11-hour days, Jackie missed school, playtime, and any chance at a normal childhood. Hollywood didn't treat him like a child. It treated him like a money-making machine. Though Jackie later found success as an adult actor and director, the scars from his childhood stayed with him. His early fame, built on fear and pressure, took a toll on his relationships and personal life. His story stands as a brutal example of how Hollywood once treated child actors, squeezing them for emotion and discarding their well-being. Jackie Cooper's painful experience shows how far Hollywood would go to get the perfect shot. But sometimes, the emotional burden wasn't just for one scene. It became a whole character that trapped young actors in roles far beyond their years. Up next, let's look at Jackie's heartbreaking role in The Champ. Jackie Cooper in The Champ, 1931. After Skippy, Jackie Cooper was cast in The Champ, a movie that piled even more emotional weight onto his young shoulders. In the film, he played Dink, the devoted son of a washed-up, alcoholic boxer. Jackie's role wasn't just about being cute. It was about carrying the emotional heart of a broken adult world. He had to cry, beg, hope, and heal, one critic wrote, and he was just a boy. In The Champ, Dink tries everything to help his father, cleaning up after him, encouraging him to stay sober, and cheering him on in the boxing ring. Jackie wasn't just playing a kid. He was acting like a caretaker, almost like a mother or a wife. Hollywood loved it. They realized audiences adored seeing a small boy shoulder the emotional burdens of a broken man. And so, Jackie was pushed into playing similar boy-wife roles again and again. This typecasting followed him for years. Instead of being seen as a versatile young actor, he was locked into playing children who were wise beyond their years, endlessly loyal, and heartbreakingly pure. These roles blurred traditional family dynamics and placed unrealistic emotional demands on a child performer. Jackie had to act out adult responsibilities before he even understood what they meant. Sadly, when Jackie aged out of the sweet caretaker roles, Hollywood didn't know what to do with him. He struggled to transition into adult parts and faced the same fate many child stars do, being labeled washed up by his 30s. Jackie's story is a powerful reminder that forcing children to carry adult emotions on screen can have serious consequences off-screen too. Jackie Cooper's story showed how Hollywood could freeze a child into a role they were never meant to bear. But what happens when a young star becomes trapped inside a character so big and so goofy that they can never escape it? Let's move on to Jaleel White and the bittersweet story of Steve Urkel. Jaleel White in Family Matters, 1989 to 1998. Jaleel White was only 12 years old when he slipped into the suspenders of Steve Urkel, the clumsy, nerdy neighbor who would take over Family Matters, and his entire career. Originally meant to be a one-time guest character, Urkel's goofy voice, huge glasses, and endless catchphrases became a national phenomenon almost overnight. "Did I do that?" became a part of everyday conversation. But behind the laughs, Jaleel quickly realized he was losing control of his own identity. At first, Jaleel loved the success. He was suddenly a star, earning millions of fans and becoming a pop culture icon. But as the seasons rolled on, playing Urkel became a heavy burden. Jaleel found himself stuck. Directors, producers, and even audiences didn't want him anymore. They wanted Urkel. He once said in an interview, "If you ever see me play that character again, shoot me." It was a cry of frustration from a young man desperate to grow beyond a role that no longer fit him. Even after Family Matters ended, Hollywood struggled to see Jaleel as anything other than Urkel. Serious roles were hard to come by. Casting directors often laughed off the idea of him playing a regular teenager or young adult. Jaleel tried voice acting, smaller TV roles, and even independent films. But the shadow of Urkel followed him everywhere. Over time, Jaleel came to terms with his complicated legacy. He eventually embraced the character that made him famous. But the journey wasn't easy. His story is a bittersweet reminder that sometimes Hollywood's greatest gifts, fame, recognition, adoration, come with chains that are nearly impossible to break. Jaleel White's experience shows how fame at a young age can be a double-edged sword. But sometimes, the roles given to young actresses didn't just trap them, they put them directly in harm's way, exposing them to adult worlds far too soon. Up next, the shocking story of Brooke Shields in Pretty Baby. Brooke Shields in Pretty Baby, 1978. At just 12 years old, Brooke Shields was cast in Pretty Baby, a film that many believe never should have been made with a real child actress. Brooke played Violet, a girl raised in a New Orleans brothel who is eventually auctioned off to adult men. The filmmakers insisted it was an artistic statement, but audiences were horrified. Shields later reflected, "I didn't even really know what I was doing." The controversy wasn't just about what was shown, it was about the decision to expose a real child to such mature themes. Shields was made to act out scenarios far beyond her years, blurring the line between storytelling and exploitation. Critics slammed the film, arguing that no art justified using a child this way, no matter the historical accuracy or intended message. The impact on Brooke was enormous. After Pretty Baby, the world didn't see her as an innocent child. They saw her as a symbol of controversy and sensuality. Interviews, magazine spreads, and roles that followed often emphasized her appearance and maturity rather than her talents. Shields had to grow up faster than any kid should, forced to navigate a media landscape obsessed with her image. Over time, Brooke fought hard to reclaim her career and personal identity. She went on to earn academic success, act in more age-appropriate roles, and become a respected voice in Hollywood. But the early exploitation she faced in Pretty Baby left deep marks, a painful reminder of how easily the industry could sacrifice childhood innocence in the name of a good story. Brooke Shields' early role in Pretty Baby left a permanent mark on her and showed that even critical acclaim couldn't erase real harm. But what happens when a child star gets thrown into a violent, action-packed world where no one seems to worry about protecting them? Let's dive into the story of Edward Furlong and Terminator 2. Edward Furlong in Terminator 2, Judgment Day, 1991. Edward Furlong was just a normal kid when he was discovered at a Boys and Girls Club, and within months, he was starring opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2. Furlong's raw energy made John Connor believable, and audiences loved him instantly. "I had no clue what was happening," Furlong later said. "It was like winning the lottery, but without any instructions." In the movie, John Connor wasn't just a rebellious teenager, he was humanity's last hope. Furlong had to carry scenes of intense violence, trauma, and emotional breakdowns. While T2 became a blockbuster and launched Edward into stardom, it also threw him into a Hollywood lifestyle that would soon spiral out of control. The pressure of fame at such a young age was enormous, and there were few safeguards in place to help him handle it. After T2, Furlong's life quickly unraveled. Instead of being protected and guided, he found himself surrounded by people who enabled bad habits. By the time he was a teenager, he was struggling with drug addiction and legal troubles. "It all happened so fast," he later admitted. "One minute I was famous, and the next minute, I was lost." Losing the role of John Connor in Terminator 3 was a devastating blow, one that symbolized how far he'd fallen. Today, Edward Furlong's story is a sobering reminder that early fame without real support can destroy even the brightest talents. He's been open about his struggles with addiction and is working on rebuilding his life. But the path he walked, from instant star to tragic cautionary tale, was one he should never have had to face alone. Edward Furlong's rise and fall show what happens when a young star is handed the world, but no tools to survive it. But what about when the problem isn't just fame? It's being pushed into dangerously blurred relationships from the start? Up next, Natalie Portman's haunting experience in Léon, The Professional. Natalie Portman in Léon, The Professional, 1994. At just 12 years old, Natalie Portman made her film debut in Léon, The Professional, a story about a young girl who bonds with a hitman after her family is murdered. While the film received critical praise, the relationship between Portman's character Matilda and the much older Léon made many people extremely uncomfortable. "I didn't really understand the implications at the time," Natalie admitted later. In Léon, Matilda's affection for Léon tiptoes dangerously close to romantic, creating an unsettling dynamic that critics have debated ever since. Though the movie tried to frame their bond as pure, the way some scenes were shot and how audiences reacted often sexualized Natalie in ways that no child should ever experience. It showed how quickly Hollywood could blur dangerous lines, even with the best intentions. The impact on Portman's life was immediate. After Léon, she became hyper-aware of her public image. She once said she had to dress more conservatively and reject certain roles to avoid being seen as a Lolita figure. As a teenager, she turned down scripts that asked for nudity or sexualized scenes, determined to control how Hollywood would perceive her. "I built walls around myself," she said. "I had to." Today, Natalie Portman is celebrated as one of the most intelligent, powerful actresses of her generation. But her early experiences taught her hard lessons about survival in an industry that often puts profit over protection. Leon may have launched her career, but it also forced her to fight for her dignity from the very beginning. Natalie Portman's story reminds us that even the best roles can come with hidden dangers. And sometimes, young actresses weren't just pushed into controversial parts. They were trapped in real-life power struggles that damaged their careers forever. Coming up next, the chilling experience of Tippi Hedren under Alfred Hitchcock's control. Tippi Hedren in The Birds, 1963. When Alfred Hitchcock cast Tippi Hedren in The Birds, she was a fresh new face in Hollywood. But behind the scenes, her experience was far from glamorous. Hitchcock, known for his controlling nature, became obsessed with her. He was a master manipulator, Hedren later revealed. At first, she thought it was just part of the job, but things quickly turned dark. During the filming of The Birds, Hitchcock promised that mechanical birds would be used for dangerous scenes. Instead, on the day of shooting, Hedren learned she would be attacked by real, live birds. She was pecked, scratched, and terrified for 5 straight days. One of the birds even got tangled in her hair, causing real physical injury. "I was exhausted, and I was scared," she later said. It was brutal. Hedren also faced relentless psychological pressure from Hitchcock. He reportedly tried to control everything about her life, from her hair and makeup to where she went after filming. When she rejected his unwanted advances, Hitchcock allegedly sabotaged her career. Despite giving a brilliant performance, Hedren found herself blacklisted from major roles after The Birds and Marnie. The man who had promised her stardom became her biggest obstacle. Today, Tippi Hedren is remembered not just as a screen queen, but as one of the first actresses to speak out about abusive power in Hollywood. Her experience on The Birds highlights how even the biggest names could fall victim to manipulation, and how standing up for yourself could cost you everything in a town built on silence. Tippi Hedren's story reminds us that sometimes the scariest monsters in Hollywood weren't on screen. They were behind the camera. But what about actresses who were pushed into careers they didn't even choose? Next, let's explore the tragic story of Maria Schneider and Last Tango in Paris. Maria Schneider in Last Tango in Paris, 1972. Maria Schneider was just 19 when she starred opposite Marlon Brando in Last Tango in Paris, a movie now infamous for its shocking betrayal of her trust. The film's director, Bernardo Bertolucci, and Brando conspired to create a controversial, unscripted scene without Maria's consent. "They didn't tell me what was going to happen," she later said. "I felt humiliated and, to be honest, a little raped." The scene, which involved an assault with a stick of butter, was never in the script. Maria was only told minutes before filming, leaving her no time to emotionally prepare. Bertolucci later admitted that he and Brando wanted her genuine reaction of shock and sadness. What they got was real trauma, captured forever on camera. Hollywood called it bold filmmaking. Maria called it betrayal. The emotional damage was deep and lasting. Maria struggled with depression, addiction, and a distrust of the film industry. She said she never again felt safe on a set. Despite appearing in other films, she never regained the sense of security she lost that day. "That scene ruined part of my life," she confessed in later interviews. Today, Maria Schneider's story serves as a haunting reminder that art should never come at the cost of consent. Her experience pushed Hollywood to have deeper conversations about protecting actors, conversations that, sadly, are still ongoing today. What happened to Maria was not daring or revolutionary. It was abuse, plain and simple. Maria Schneider's betrayal shows the horrifying cost of directors chasing real emotion without thinking about real people. But what happens when an actress is pushed into being little more than a sex symbol, and then blamed when it all goes wrong? Let's turn to Elizabeth Berkley and the disaster of Showgirls. Elizabeth Berkley in Showgirls, 1995. Elizabeth Berkley thought Showgirls would make her a superstar. Instead, it almost destroyed her career. Cast as Nomi Malone, a young woman desperate for fame in Las Vegas, Berkeley was thrown into a role filled with nudity, sex scenes, and graphic violence, all at just 22 years old. "I was young," she later said. "I didn't realize what I was stepping into." The movie was marketed as edgy and groundbreaking, but the reality was different. Showgirls was a critical and commercial failure, and Berkeley took the full brunt of the blame. Critics mocked her performance relentlessly, calling it over the top and embarrassing. Instead of blaming the script or the director's choices, Hollywood pointed fingers at Berkeley, labeling her as a joke rather than a young actress who had been thrown into a no-win situation. The backlash was brutal. Berkeley was dropped by her agent and blacklisted from major roles for years. She went from starring in a big-budget film to struggling to find even minor TV parts. "No one would take a chance on me," she said. "It felt like I had a scarlet letter on my forehead." In later years, showgirls developed a cult following, and Berkeley slowly found her way back to public sympathy. She reclaimed her image, but the scars of being blamed for the film's failure never fully faded. Her story reminds us that in Hollywood, when a risky project bombs, it's often the young, vulnerable actresses, not the powerful directors or studios, who pay the highest price. Elizabeth Berkley's downfall shows how quickly Hollywood can turn on the very actresses it pushes into risky roles. But not every career collapse was caused by controversy. Sometimes it was the silent, slow erosion of being trapped in a single character. Coming up next, the bittersweet story of Miley Cyrus after LOL. Miley Cyrus in LOL, 2012. At 18 years old, Miley Cyrus was trying to move beyond her Disney Channel image when she took the lead role in LOL. In the film, she played a rebellious teenager navigating love, sex, and growing pains. It was supposed to be a coming-of-age drama, but for Miley, it ended up being more of a public relations disaster. "I wanted to do something real," she later said, but it backfired. LOL failed at the box office, and critics slammed it as cringy, overly sexualized, and shallow. Instead of helping her break out of the Hannah Montana mold, the film only confused audiences. Miley's fan base, many of whom were still kids, wasn't ready to see her kissing boys, partying, and talking about losing her virginity. The shift felt too sudden and too forced. The film's failure had lasting effects. Miley found herself caught between two worlds, too mature for her young fans, but not taken seriously by adult audiences. In the years that followed, she drastically changed her image, famously swinging on a wrecking ball and shedding her wholesome persona completely. Critics called it a meltdown, but Miley insisted it was survival. "I had to kill Hannah Montana to save myself," she once explained. Today, Miley Cyrus is respected for her resilience and her ability to reinvent herself on her own terms. But the messy transition that LOL triggered shows how hard it is for young actresses to grow up in public. Hollywood and the fans often demand innocence forever, but punish any attempt at growing into adulthood. Miley Cyrus's rocky shift into adulthood showed how fame can trap young stars between two impossible expectations. But sometimes, the harm wasn't about growing up. It was about being pushed into roles too dark, too brutal, too soon. Let's move into the tragic story of Susan George and Straw Dogs. Susan George in Straw Dogs, 1971. Susan George was just 21 when she starred in Sam Peckinpah's controversial thriller Straw Dogs. In it, she played Amy, a young woman who endures horrifying violence in a film that blurred the lines between drama and exploitation. The most disturbing scene, a sexual assault, was so graphic that even decades later, it remains one of the most controversial in movie history. "I didn't know how much it would stay with me," George said years later. At the time, George trusted Peckinpah to handle the material with care. Instead, she found herself being pushed into a scene that many critics said crossed the line into glorifying violence. George later admitted that she felt pressured to perform in a way that didn't match her instincts, more for the shock value than for storytelling. The emotional trauma didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. The controversy around Straw Dogs haunted George's career. Although she was praised for her performance, Hollywood quickly typecast her in vulnerable, victimized roles. Instead of becoming a versatile leading lady, she found herself boxed into parts that mimicked the trauma of straw dogs over and over again. "It followed me like a shadow," she said. "I could never fully escape it." Today, Straw Dogs is seen both as a classic thriller and as an example of how actresses were once used as shock props rather than protected collaborators. Susan George's story is a reminder that even in artistic films, the cost to the performer can be devastating, and that the scars of one role can last a lifetime. Susan George's painful experience shows how Hollywood's thirst for shock often left real women carrying the burden. But sometimes, even a critically acclaimed movie could force a young actress into uncomfortable places too soon. Let's close this chapter with Thora Birch's controversial role in American Beauty. Thora Birch in American Beauty, 1999. When American Beauty hit theaters in 1999, it was hailed as a masterpiece. But for Thora Birch, who was just 16 at the time, the experience was far more complicated. In one scene, her character appeared topless, making Birch one of the few minors ever filmed nude in a major Hollywood movie. "It was discussed extensively," Birch said later. "I had my parents' consent, but it was still weird." The decision to include the scene, even with parental approval and careful filming protocols, sparked heavy controversy. Critics questioned why it was even necessary to put a teenage actress in such a vulnerable position, no matter how carefully it was handled. The scene, once considered daring, now raises serious ethical questions about what lines should never be crossed with young actors. For Birch, the aftermath was strange. On one hand, her performance was praised, and American Beauty became a massive success. But on the other hand, being sexualized on screen at such a young age affected how casting directors and the public viewed her afterward. She later struggled to find roles that allowed her to move beyond the image the movie had cemented. Thora Birch's experience with American Beauty remains a classic case of Hollywood walking a dangerous tightrope, trying to tell powerful stories while risking the well-being of the young people who bring them to life. Her story reminds us that behind even the most celebrated movies, there are still uncomfortable truths that deserve to be told. Fame may be fleeting, but the impact of these roles lasted a lifetime. Behind every headline and poster was a young woman navigating impossible choices. As we look back, one thing is clear: Hollywood's greatest failures weren't box office bombs, but the moments it failed to protect its brightest stars.